Okay, this is um, about binding your seams with bias tape. So first let's look a little bit about bias tape again. You can buy the bias tape in ready-made in generally solid colors in the store. And they come different widths. We're going to use this 25-inch and it's double folded, meaning quarter of an inch, excuse me, 0.25 of an inch, which is the same as a quarter inch, and it's double folded. What that looks like inside is, meaning double folded, is it's here right now, this is a ½ inch, and if I completely unfold it again, we get to an inch, and it's been divided into or folded and pressed like in 4 sections that are considered a quarter of an inch each. When it's all pressed and folded up, it looks like this, double folded. Now, it's not quite exactly even. You can see that here, that one side doesn't come quite to the center and neither does the other side. And they are a certain fraction of a bit off from each other, and they're supposed to be. Do you see how one side is a shade bit longer than the other? If I turn this over, you can't see that other side. And one side is just a tiny bit shorter than the other side. Okay, it's very hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in on it for just a bit. So you can really maybe see that. So I've got, it's just a tiny bit shorter. This side is. See that? If I turned it over, we wouldn't see 2 edges. But when I turn from this side, we're going to see the 2 edges. One is just a little bit shorter than the other side. Okay. So we're going to bind a seam here using this tape. And there are 2 different ways to bind the seam. One is just a 1-stitch operation. The other is 2-stitching operation. So we're going to do a 1-stitch first. I'm going to cut my bias tape the length that I need it here for this small sample. You have been given some pieces of bias tape, so you should be able to look at this with your sample in front of you as well. So now I'm going to slip this over both edges of my seam. Now I may want to trim this down. Traditionally you do that, so it's not so much sticking out. So I'm going to take off about an healthy eighth of an inch, a little bit more off my seam, off my 5/8 inch seam. And then I'm going to place this so that that shortest side, I'm seeing it, that it's up, and the longer edge right there is on the bottom side. So it's just going to encase both of my raw edges over there, just like that. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting him laying way in there. You want to make sure it's right up next to that center fold crease in the bias tape. Folding back down over. And now I'm going to pin that in place here. Doesn't slide off. Remember, I put the short side up that I'm looking at and the longer side underneath. And I'll show you why we do that in just a moment, but it is really important that you remember to do it that way and that you can differentiate between which size is the shorter size and which side is the longer side. Understand that. Okay, now I've got it pinned in place, and if I turn this over, you want to make sure that your pins have caught that bias tape there. And technically, because the shorter one is there, if we know we're pinning in that one, we know we've probably caught the longer one because it's just a tiny bit longer. So now I'm going to zoom back out off my camera here a little bit so we can see what we're going to do. Now we're going to stitch this about a needle's width away from this edge. It's a form of edge stitching. You want to be right on the edge, close to it. Just can't go off of it. You don't want to be out in here necessarily if you're just using a single stitch. And so I'm going to sew it from that short end, the side that we pinned it from, over my seam. Position my needle where I like him. Good. And then I'm going to see that I've got it pinned really well, holding my threads. I'm going to watch now for where this is going to guide. And I'm probably going to be watching right there that my bias tape is feeding in okay right in there. And I am going to do a little back stitch, just one or two, not a big deal. And now I'm sewing. Ow, I just poked myself. Sewing along that edge. Moving the pin as I come up to it, but not too soon because you don't want that to slip away. You want to keep that nice and tight down in to that folded edge. The center edge. Keep them all the way down in there. Okay, so now let's see the moment of truth. If I turn it over, yep, I did. I caught it all the way. That is the important part, because if you don't in this particular operation, it would be loose in places on the back side. So that has to be on your bias tape, and this side has to be on your bias tape, and that is putting it on or binding a seam with just one stitch line. One pass. You'd now come in here and press these, whatever you're going to do to add any other finishing. You really wouldn't have to because it is completely enclosed with the bias tape. You could probably stitch on the outside and kind of treat it like a mock flat felt seam if you really wanted that not to be sticking up inside of your garment.